Well, I think that the trip showcases Africa's commitment to peace. I generally agree with Peter Phan's analysis that the African team really doesn't have, they don't have what it takes to make peace because they're not honest brokers. And I think that's a big problem. That you got to have leverage to make peace, to get parties to start talking. Parties don't change their behavior simply because you're asking them to. And this African team doesn't have the leverage to get anybody to take them seriously.
You probably heard what J. Peter Pham had to say about the South Africa's president and President Museveni of Uganda. But what's really in these talks for the continent?
So the continent is trying to get the parties to start talking peace. But beyond that, they are also trying to get a commitment to the Black Sea grain deal, which Africa needs. They're trying to get a fertilizer deal and a grain deal as well. But also, if you notice that the two of the leaders on this trip, Cyril Ramaphosa and Macky Sall, have serious domestic political problems, and this trip can help divert some of the attentions, negative attentions back home, and help particularly Macky Sall, who is rumored to be seeking a third term in Senegal. This might help him personally. But beyond that, I think that African leaders tend to overestimate their capacity to shape world events, and we're seeing that they've taken this trip. Personally, I think that I'm hoping that whilst they are there, particularly whilst they are in Ukraine, they educate themselves about the effects of this war. So I'm glad that they went to Bucha, for example. They can see what has happened on the ground, and even whilst they were in Kyiv, we saw them sheltering from Russian missiles coming in. And so whilst they're on the ground, hopefully they learn something about the dynamics of the conflict and they modify their behavior accordingly.
Wow, it was a scary moment. But then what's the strategy now for this African delegation and what can they achieve?
So the draft framework that has been kind of previewed in the media has a simple strategy: get the Russians to pull back troops, and get them to remove tactical weapons from Belarus in exchange for sanctions relief, including a suspension of the ICC's arrest warrant for Putin. But they're not going to be able to do any of these things, as I said, because they lack the leverage and they cannot surmount the preconditions that the Ukrainians are putting forward, which is a total withdrawal of Russian troops. And it's not even clear that the Russians themselves are also even going to take the African efforts seriously. So I think that in the end, they may come away with a deal on the grain export, but I don't see them moving any of the dynamics that's needed to get the parties to talk serious, because you need leverage for that. And African leaders have very little leverage. Even the little one that they have, they've misused it by coming up publicly on the side of the Russians. So the Ukrainians really have no reason to trust them. And I think that this is going to be a trip for photos and stuff like that.
Professor, thank you very much for your perspective. Kwaku Nuama is a professor of international politics at American University.